Reunited, and it feels so good. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Jordan Whitehead agreed to a 2-year deal. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Thursday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, and one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Become an insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. There is a trade out there that makes a lot of sense for the Buccaneers, and the new league year has officially begun with the signing of Baker Mayfield. All of that coming up in a little bit. But first, let's start with the latest news as the Bucs have agreed to terms on a player that wasn't on the roster last year, but has been on the roster before. And of course, I'm talking about safety Jordan Whitehead. Whitehead and the Bucs agreed to a 2-year deal worth $9 million, up to $10.5 million with incentives. Now, obviously, it's too early to know the structure, but another killer deal for Jason Licht and the Buccaneers, bringing back a player that they didn't exactly want to lose the first time around, and getting him for $4.5 million a year is pretty incredible. I talked about Whitehead last week, saying he would cost the Bucs around $5 to $6 million a year. And even if he hits all his incentives and gets the absolute maximum out of this contract, it's $5.25 million a year, right in that range that I mentioned. If he doesn't hit those incentives, it's even cheaper. Obviously, Bucs fans should want him to excel to the point that he hits those incentives, because that means he's dominating and is a big part of the defense. Wednesday started off with Rachaad White on Twitter posting about how the Bucs needed to bring Whitehead back, and Whitehead liked the tweets before unliking them. My guess is to avoid any kind of speculation, but less than 4 hours later, he was agreeing to terms with the Buccaneers. Then you had the outpouring of excitement about the move from Antoine Winfield Jr., Levante David, even Devin White, which then caused all kinds of new speculation as to whether or not White would be open to a return. I still don't think that's happening, but it isn't impossible. And as I mentioned to someone on Twitter, I'm starting to think that this has been a humbling experience for Devin White, and that any deal he gets is going to be heavily incentive-based. The Bucs might just be back in play for him. But I did talk a lot about Jordan Whitehead last week, and that he is at his best under Todd Bowles in Tampa. He was a key contributor during the Super Bowl run. He had more tackles for loss in the 2020 season with the Bucs than he had in 2 years with the New York Jets combined. No forced fumbles with the Jets, no fumble recoveries with the Jets, a half of a sack with the Jets. And I say all that because it's why Whitehead has been a topic of conversation on this show for the last few weeks, and why this reunion would be such a good one for both sides. Todd Bowles knew how to best use Whitehead in his defense, and that allowed him to shine and be an impact player. Reuniting him now with Winfield in the back end of the defense is a massive upgrade over what they've had the last 2 seasons, and could prove to be the difference in a few games this upcoming season. And I know some of you are thinking, okay, James, calm down. This is just Jordan Whitehead we're talking about. But think back to some of those close games in 2023 that the Bucs lost last season and how those might have been different if Jordan Whitehead had been on the field instead of Ryan Neal. And I know some of you are thinking about that Houston Texans game right out of the gate. There were a couple of games where it's like, you know what, if they were a little bit better on the back end, this may not have been a 9-8 season. Could have been more like 10-7, even 11-6. So Whitehead coming in obviously is a huge addition. Now, the signing itself has not been made officially official as of this recording, but it will be soon because Whitehead is scheduled to meet with the media on Thursday at 4 o'clock. So while the release of Shaq Barrett and the trade of Carlton Davis were made official right as the new league year began on Wednesday, the release of Russell Gage has not. Now, Over the Cap has the Bucs with just under $3.5 million left in cap space, but that does not reflect the Levante David contract, the Jordan Whitehead contract, and the release of Russell Gage. His money is still on the books, according to Over the Cap, but expect more moves by the Buccaneers sooner than later to continue to clear cap space. I talked about it on Twitter Wednesday afternoon that we know extending Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr. are extremely high priorities for Jason Licht. And I think we'll see one of those two players done before the end of the week. Winfield and Wirfs currently combined for a cap hit of, stay with me here, $35,729,582. That is a lot of money tied up in two players that can easily be alleviated with extensions. Now, beyond that, you look at Vita Vea, whose deal runs through 2026, and Chris Godwin, who is entering a contract year, and they combine for a cap hit of $48,499,063. They are the two biggest cap hits on the team for 2024. And those four guys combined, Godwin, Vea, Wirfs, and Winfield, are the top four cap hits for the 2024 season, accounting for a total of $84,228,645. Extending just two of these guys can free up a ton of money, and extending Godwin on top of that can really help the $27.5 million cap hit that he accounts for this season. I tell you all of this because in addition to this Jordan Whitehead contract, there are a few people floating out a trade idea that would work really, really well for the Buccaneers, but they need the money to do it. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I love taking advantage of the flash deals when the event that I'm going to gets closer, but there's no doubt my favorite feature is the view from your seat, so I know exactly what I'm paying for, and I'm not surprised when I get to the venue. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps, and I love being able to use Apple Pay right there on the app to secure my seats. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. I will be going live on YouTube Friday afternoon for Friday's show, just to give you all a heads up right now. Looking at around 2 in the afternoon for that live show to get started, but make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel and turn the notifications on so you know when the live is happening, or my Locked On Bucs insiders will get the heads up as to what time I am going live before everyone else. In the meantime, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. The Bucs have brought back their own and addressed one of their weakest positions in terms of who their starters are with a familiar face, but there's still a desperate need to upgrade the pass rush, and many are looking to the trade market to do so. So, some of you remember about a month ago, I talked about the Bucs should have interest in trying to acquire Hassan Reddick from the Eagles when it came out that he was being given permission to seek a trade. Now, there's a different Philadelphia Eagle that is up for grabs, and the Bucs could not only afford them, but he is a guy that could have a bounce back season in Todd Bowles' defense. And I'm talking about Josh Sweat, the former Florida State Seminole, is on the trade block along with Reddick. And Sweat tweeted out, quote, "I will miss you all," end quote, showing that he knows that his time in Philly has come to an end one way or another. Sweat is only 26 years old, and he has 31 sacks since 2020, including an 11-sack season in 2022. He has played in 49 games in the last 3 seasons, and in addition to the sacks, he has 7 forced fumbles and 38 tackles for loss since 2020, 45 tackles for loss over the course of his career. Sweat is incredibly quick off the line, and best of all, he's affordable. Sweat is due a base salary of just $1.125 million this year, which is a contract year. And the cost to get him won't be much because he's on a contract year. You're only trading for him for essentially 1 year unless you get the opportunity to negotiate an extension before making the trade official. On top of all of that, the Eagles are already eating a ton of money on this deal. It was a 3-year, $40 million deal that the Eagles signed him to because of all the void years that they added in to the contract for Sweat. So think about this. The Bucs got a 3rd-round pick in exchange for Carlton Davis and 2 6th-rounders on Davis's expiring contract. The Bucs could end up giving up a 4th since they don't have a 5th and getting a plug-and-play edge rusher that they desperately need. Even if you have to give up the 3rd that you just got for Davis, what edge rusher would you get in the 3rd round at pick 92 that would have the impact that Sweat would right out of the gate? The answer to that is probably none. Like, extremely, extremely likely that you would not get one at 92 that would have the impact that Sweat would. Now, a move like this could open up the 1st round completely for the Buccaneers in terms of what position they addressed. Yes, they absolutely could still go edge rusher, but now you could pivot to corner to replace Carlton Davis if you feel like Zion McCollum and Jamel Dean are not the duo that you want to go into the season with. You could look at guard. I've talked about Graham Barton on this show quite a few times, the guard out of Duke. You could go center. If Jackson Power Johnson is sitting there, the center out of Oregon, he is slated to be a 1st-round pick. Then you're moving Hainsey over to guard, and you've really solidified your offensive line. You could even go wide receiver because they have no wide receiver 3 as it stands now. And again, Chris Godwin is entering a contract year. And if you don't think that you're going to be able to afford Godwin on top of the contract that you just gave Mike Evans, now you're drafting a guy that could be your number 3 in 24 and slide in to your wide receiver 2 in 25, potentially becoming your wide receiver 1 in 26 if Mike Evans either retires or moves on. And again, you're getting a proven commodity at the biggest position of need for cheap in both terms of compensation and cap hit, with the opportunity to work out a long-term deal with him and solidify the side that was abandoned by the release of Shaq Barrett. Now you have the opportunity to go into the year with Josh Sweat and Yaya Diaby as your starting edge rushers. Yaya Diaby, coming off of an amazing rookie year, led the team with 7.5 sacks. Then you have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka and Anthony Nelson as your rotational pieces and your depth pieces that can come in when needed. That puts the Bucs right back into a position where the pass rush is getting home and creating opportunities for the secondary, opening the door for guys like Antoine Winfield Jr. and Jordan Whitehead to be the huge playmakers that they are. Using a mid-round pick or even that Lions third-round pick that you got for Davis to land a player who is entering a contract year and will be highly motivated after being dealt since the Eagles brought in Bryce Huff is a dangerous combination for anyone facing the Buccaneers in this Todd Bowles defense. And if it doesn't work, if you send a third or a fourth round pick to the Philadelphia Eagles and Sweat comes in and he is not effective, he only gets 5 sacks this season, he disappears for weeks at a time, it's not a big deal. It stinks that it didn't work out, but in the grand scheme of things, it would have cost the Bucs virtually nothing to give it a try. The big name edge rushers left on the market are all either much older than Josh Sweat or will cost a lot more money than what Sweat will this season. This would be such a Jason Light move to make a low risk, high reward trade that could wind up being as beneficial as the Barrett tenure was for the Buccaneers when they brought him in as essentially an unproven free agent, ended up slapping the franchise tag on him, then signing him to a huge contract. And it really helps Todd Bowles be able to get the pieces in place that allow for his defense to do what it's intended to do. And that is to get very, very fast pressure on the quarterback, forcing him to either get rid of the ball quickly or eat a sack. And by forcing him to get rid of the ball quickly, now you have your playmakers in place on the back end in Lavonte David, Jordan Whitehead, Antoine Winfield Jr., Jamel Dean, Zion McCollum. I don't know, maybe Devin White. You don't know. I never shut that door completely. I left it just barely a sliver open, and he's starting to post some things that make you think, well, he might come back. But you have these guys in place now in McCollum and Dean and Whitehead and Winfield and Lavonte that can make plays in the secondary and force those quarterbacks to make mistakes because Josh Sweat and Yaya Diaby are coming off the edge. Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea are crushing the interior of the pocket and forcing the quarterback into a bad spot. That is when this Buccaneers team is at its best. When the defense is teeing off on the quarterback and forcing takeaways to give their offense more opportunities to run up the score. Josh Sweat, I think, would be, again, a low-risk, high-reward trade in terms of compensation and the money against the cap. And again, now your first-round pick at 26 has all kinds of options available for you, and you could go into a myriad of different directions. Baker Mayfield has officially signed his 3-year deal. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Wrapping things up here on a Thursday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and the Buccaneers held the press conference for Baker Mayfield after he officially signed his 3-year deal, and it was exactly what you thought it would be. Jason Light and Baker Mayfield were all smiles during the press conference announcing his deal, and for good reason. Both sides took a chance on one another, and it paid off in a big, big way. Baker told the media that he and his wife were actually out with Tristan Wirfs and his girlfriend when he got the call that the deal was done. And that kind of showed how close he and Tristan are. They have a very tight relationship. They are best friends, and, both on and off the field. And then Mayfield also mentioned that Mike Evans had called him over the weekend, that Evans' deal got worked out. And he said, "Are we doing this or what?" And that was how Mayfield found out about Mike Evans' contract. And it showed how much Evans wanted Baker back as well. And this is what I was referencing when I talked about Russell Wilson last week. This team, the front office, the coaches, the players, they all love Baker Mayfield. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what we get out of Baker next year and beyond now. Obviously, he and his wife are happy to be back in Tampa. That's where they wanted to be. They were talking about making Tampa their offseason home, regardless of where he played, because they love the community and they love the people. And obviously, the team is happy that he is back in Tampa. But what is the Baker Mayfield going to be when he isn't out to prove that he's still a starting caliber quarterback? The one thing that will, or the one quarterback that was dismissed from 2 teams in a span of a few months, and he had to go out and he had to earn everything that the Bucs got last year. He had to fight for everything. He had to fight for his job. He had to fight to get the Bucs back on track when they were in a bad lull. What is that Baker going to look like? Mayfield told the media that he hates losing, and he's motivated by the loss to the Lions in the playoffs, talking about how they were in it right up until the end. And it motivates him and the other guys in the locker room to take it another step further. They were, a couple of plays away from an NFC championship appearance, and that he is here in Tampa to win Super Bowls. But is he going to let off the gas a little bit now that he got his bag? His career earnings in the first 6 years of his career add up to a little over $55 million. Now he can earn more than that in the next 2 years. That's a different kind of pressure. Last year, there was pressure to prove that he's still a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. Now he has to prove that he's worth the amount of money that he's getting, something that we've seen quarterbacks fail to do over the years. And you really don't have to go back any further than last year. And you take a look at Daniel Jones' contract, Jimmy Garoppolo's contract, to a certain extent, Derek Carr's contract, and how they did not live up to their deals. Daniel Jones, that deal is atrocious, and the Giants can't wait to get out of it. Jimmy Garoppolo, he got cut by the Las Vegas Raiders. Derek Carr, he was as wishy-washy as pretty much any quarterback in the NFL was last year. And Evan and I talked about it on Wednesday's show, that there are people that will root for Baker to fail and people that are just never going to like him, and that's whatever. But the pressure is on now for Baker Mayfield to prove that he was worth the investment that the Bucs just put in. They signed him to a prove it deal last year, and he went out there and he proved it. Now they are signing him to not elite money, but upper half money as it stands right now before more deals end up getting done and extensions get done and the cap gets higher. And now it's, was he worth that? They built in and out just in case he doesn't live up to that. And here's the thing that I think gets overlooked about Baker Mayfield. And one of the reasons that this time last year, I was pounding the table for Baker to be the quarterback for the Buccaneers, given what the options were. And it's because he's built to withstand that kind of pressure. He said it right after the Lions game when David and I were sitting there during his press conference. He said it again on Wednesday during his press conference that he knew sacrifices had to be made. Someone had asked him about the Kirk Cousins contract, and he said, you can't look at other people's money and then question what you did. Sacrifices had to be made to make sure that they were able to bring everybody back. So yeah, sure, he probably left some money on the table, and Kirk Cousins' deal is, it's pretty huge. And you have to look and think, is Kirk Cousins that much better than Baker Mayfield? I would say no. Think of how much guaranteed money that he's got. Kirk Cousins has gotten more money from his NFL contracts over the span of his career than Tom Brady did. And what do the Washington Commanders, that's not the Washington mascot that Kirk played for, but what do Washington and Minnesota have to show for the amount of guaranteed money that they gave to Kirk Cousins? Nothing. One playoff win in Minnesota. I mean, Baker's got more than that between the Browns and the Bucs. He was with the Bucs for 1 year and got a playoff win. Kirk Cousins hasn't been able to get the job done. So maybe it works out in Atlanta. I'm going to venture to guess that it's the same old Kirk. And you're going to look at what the Falcons do and what Kirk Cousins does. And you're going to look at the Buccaneers and what Baker Mayfield does. And you're going to see that the Bucs got the better quarterback for the better deal when all the smoke clears. And let's be honest, Baker Mayfield is a self-motivating person. He's motivated by the struggles that the Bucs had last year. He's motivated by the playoff loss where his last pass was an interception. It was a bad pass. It was a bad decision. He tried to force something that wasn't there because it was desperation time. And, he's had to live with that. He's motivated by wanting to win a Super Bowl. He's motivated by the fact that it doesn't matter what his contract is now. The Browns still shipped him out of town in exchange for Deshaun Watson. And the Panthers were a sinking ship engulfed in flames that cut him and allowed him to go to Los Angeles. The Bucs gave him the chance, and now he's cashed in because of it. And I think that motivates him. Motivates him to prove the Buccaneers were right to give him that opportunity. And the Buccaneers were right to pay him the money that they just did, because he's going to continue to lead this team to the postseason. And he talks about, keep talking about the Falcons and what they've done and keep calling them the favorites when these rosters aren't even set yet. All that does is motivate us. So, we'll see if it translates to the field. But so far, much like when he signed the first time around, I like what I'm hearing out of Baker Mayfield, but it's got to play out on the field. That is going to do it for this episode. Remember, I will be back on Friday live on YouTube, probably around 2:00 in the afternoon Eastern time. But again, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications so you will know when I am going live. I will also post it on Twitter. And of course, the Locked On Bucs insiders will know way ahead of everyone else. And you can become a Locked On Bucs insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Please check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.